Reptilians, welcome back to my channel. So this week I am still out of town, but I thought it would be kind of cool to make a video about what not to buy from pet stores, or basically a few things that pet stores sell that they really shouldn't. These are things that I see every time I go to pet stores, and it just completely baffles me as to why they are even in stores, because not only are they not useful, but they can be very dangerous. My only assumption is that these are things that at one time were considered to be safe or to be okay, and we have learned since then that they are not okay and they are not safe, but pet stores still are going to make money off of selling these things, so of course they're going to continue to sell them and continue to market them at the risk of losing money from them. Quick disclaimer, my children are playing in the other room, so if you hear random squawking noises, that is what that is. Without further ado, let's get into that list. The first one, and the most frustrating one, is something that everyone talks about all the time, and that is calci sand. Calci sand is marketed towards desert-dwelling creatures like bearded dragons and leopard geckos, saying that it is a safe alternative to just normal play sand because it is made from calcium, which are things that those animals need. Now, yes, those animals do need calcium, but this is when that too much of a good thing comes into play. So with calcium sand, creatures like leopard geckos actually know when they are deficient on calcium and will lick up calcium from things like little dishes. That's why you're able to put a little calcium dish in a leopard gecko tank, and as they need it, they will consume it. With calcium sand, they are surrounded by calcium. So they are going around consuming this calcium sand, and it's building and building and building inside of their bodies, and it causes impaction and death. While creatures like bearded dragons don't necessarily consume raw calcium regularly, they lick everything, and so if they're going around licking that calcium sand, they're going to consume it and consume it and consume it, and it's going to cause impaction. The argument for using calci sand is that if your husbandry is correct, there won't be an impaction issue, but if your animal is just eating sand non-stop, they are going to get impacted whether you are doing everything correctly or not. When you look up calci sand, you find just a whole bunch of pictures of poor reptiles that have died or that are in surgery, and just bright purple sand or bright blue sand is coming out of their bodies, and that's just not okay. Now, I know there are always people that say, I have kept my animal on calci sand for X amount of years and never had an issue. Yes, maybe you have, but I don't see why you would want to take that risk, especially when the risk is literally your animal dying. So calci sand is something that shouldn't be sold in stores, and it's definitely something that you shouldn't be buying for your animal. Next up, heat rocks. I briefly talked about these in my how to provide your animal extra heat during the winter, whatever that video was called. I talked about these and how they are unsafe. Heat rocks for years were used as a source of heating for animals, and they sound like a good idea. They are a rock that is heating, so your animal can go and bask on this rock and get heat from below, and it looks nice. So it makes sense that they sell so many of them, but unfortunately they're just not safe. Heat rocks can get very hot, and if your reptile's laying on top of it and it's getting that hot, they're gonna burn themselves, and it can cause detrimental injuries to that animal, and even little injuries can get infected and cause that animal to suffer. Some people ask why you can't just put that heat rock on a thermostat, and that is because heat rocks are not evenly heated. So if you put the probe on the heat rock, yes, it's going to maintain that temperature, but heat rocks are known to be incredibly uneven with their heating. So if that one spot is 85, 90 degrees, this spot up here could be, I don't know, 120, over 120, and start to burn your animal. This is another thing that is marketed nonstop towards reptiles, and it's just not okay to have in your reptile's environment if you are trying to make a safe environment for them. There are plenty of other safer heating options, which again, did in that video, but heat rocks just aren't it. Since we are talking about heating, red lights. This is another thing I talked about in that past video. Red lights are marketed as a nighttime light for your animal to keep them warm. Nocturnal animals need darkness at night. Diurnal animals want to sleep in the darkness at night, just like you and me do, presumably. The idea behind the red lights is that reptiles can't see red, but you're not taking into consideration that even if they couldn't see red, it's still a light. So even if that animal can't see red and you have it on at nighttime, you are now just blasting light into that tank. Not being able to see a color doesn't mean that it disappears from reality. Humans are colorblind, but just because you're red-green colorblind doesn't mean that the color red just disappears from reality. It's just gonna look like a different color. Now, personally, I used to always say that it was okay to use those in the daytime, but I have heard from multiple people that the red light actually hurt their animal's eyes, and so personally that is just not a risk that I would be willing to take. That is up to you to decide what you want to do, but I'm just letting you know what I have heard and what I decided I wasn't comfortable with anymore because of that. So the fact that red lights are highly marketed in pet stores as a nighttime light and even sold with kits sometimes as a night light for things like bearded dragons, I highly advised against them, and I don't think that they should be marketed like that at all. Speaking of those kits, reptile kits are very rarely ever correct. More often than not, I don't know if I've ever actually seen a good reptile kit, but kits are always filled with things to make you pay more money for that tank and to make you feel like you are getting a complete setup for an animal. However, most of the time, those kits are, number one, made for a baby reptile, and number two, they don't come with what you actually need. So again, going to that bearded dragon example, most kits that I see for bearded dragons are either coming with sand as a 20-gallon tank, or they come with dome lighting, sometimes including that red light, and a normal light bulb UVB light, and those are not okay for bearded dragons. Bearded dragons need fluorescent tube lighting UVB to get the proper amount of UV lighting that they need to grow and to digest their food correctly. So I really don't think I've ever seen a kit for a bearded dragon that was correct. And then looking at things like chameleons, the chameleon kits, if you read the box for those chameleon kits, they are usually much smaller than you actually need for that animal. So it will be a small chameleon kit and say that it is okay for all chameleons. Panther chameleons, for example, get big. You cannot keep a panther chameleon in a Reptibreeze tank that is that small. And in buying that kit, in the end, you're actually losing money because you're gonna have to correct those things that were incorrect down the road. So it's honestly cheaper just to buy a tank from a $1 per gallon sale. And on Craigslist, secondhand tanks most of the time come with everything that you need, that you actually need. And if not, you're only spending maybe $50, $100 for everything and then having to add on a couple of things like new light bulbs. So kits should not be sold, in my opinion, unless you're gonna do it correctly. If you're not gonna do it correctly, then there's no point in selling it. I mean, for them, there's a point. They just made a lot of money and they're also gonna make even more money off of what you now have to turn around and correct. I'm curious though, if you have ever seen a kit that actually comes with what is needed, let me know like what the brand of that is down below, because I've never seen one except for at reptile shows where the people selling those animals will put together their own kits. But the actual chain pet store kits, I've never seen one that actually came with everything. But moving on. Fish bowls or any kind of tiny little tank marketed towards goldfish and betta fish. These drive me crazy. Betta fish, for example, need at least 5 gallons, and pet stores just consistently sell little bitty half-gallon tanks that they show pictures of fully grown betta fish in. The idea behind this one is that betta fish come from tiny little ponds where they live their whole lives. However, the rice paddies that they originally live in, while they are shallow, they are huge. They are rice fields. So while they don't have a bunch of up and down swimming space, they can swim across those fields. Anytime I've ever seen a betta fish in those tiny little tanks, they always look so miserable and their fins are always clamped because they don't have anywhere to swim. This same concept goes to fish bowls and the pictures of the goldfish that are kept in those bowls to sell them. Most goldfish get really big. You cannot keep a goldfish in a bowl this big and expect it to be okay. Goldfish not only get big, but they are also super messy. My husband and I used to have a very large goldfish tank 7 years ago, and we had it for years before we ended up moving with the military, but that's a whole thing. That tank, we loved it so much, but it got disgusting fast. We had to have 2 giant filters on the back and do water changes a lot just to keep up with the amount of waste that those goldfish produced. Whether it's a goldfish, betta fish, whatever it is, they need filtration. They are pooping in that water and old food is just sitting in that water, so it has to be filtered. So a bowl, unless it is a temporary cleaning out a fish tank sort of thing, a bowl is never the answer, and a half-gallon tank with no filtration is never the answer. And lastly, I know that was 5, but I usually always do an honorable mention because 5 sounds better than 6. So my honorable mention, or dishonorable mention maybe, and we are putting this at the end because it doesn't have anything to do with reptiles or fish or anything, and that is rawhide bones. Rawhide bones are sold everywhere for dogs, and they are incredibly unsafe. They are a giant choking hazard. They have caused bowel obstruction for animals. They have caused many dogs to have surgery to remove pieces of rawhide bone from their body. This is something that I didn't know when I first got my dog, and I always gave him rawhide bones, and he got sick after eating them, but I knew that he loved them, and from what I saw in the pet store, they were okay, but actually they weren't. And I'm just very thankful that something super serious didn't happen to him while I was giving him those bones. But yeah, those are definitely a health hazard, and they are very risky to feed your animals. Like I said, with all of these, this may be something that you have used for a while and nothing bad has ever happened, but just know that there is the possibility that something bad could happen. I used those rawhide bones for forever and nothing bad happened, but those risks were way too high for me to risk my doggies, so that's not something that I do anymore. And I just wanted to throw this in here as kind of a PSA. This is something else that's sold at a pet store that shouldn't be. Please don't use them. But that is it, guys. That is the entire list. Again, apologize for the pterodactyl screaming in the background if you could hear that, but that's it. If there is anything that I missed, which I only listed 6 things, so of course there probably is, let me know down below what shouldn't be sold and why. Maybe you will help someone out in the future who is looking into buying any of these things. And if you are using any of these things, or you really want to use any of these things, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but maybe this was a little bit helpful for you, or maybe it just made you super mad, I don't know. But anyways, guys, as always, if you are not already, please feel free to follow me on my other socials and like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications every single time I put out a new video, which is every Sunday. This week's Instagram shout out goes to Chuck Hall Scorpion King, who has been following me here on YouTube for a while and has also followed me on Instagram and gone through and liked a whole bunch of my stuff. Thank you so much, Chuck. You are the bee's knees. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye. There have been, when you look up calci sand, when you look them, fins are always, and they're including that light, sometimes including or heating, or they come with those